it's Lee from colouringqueen.net and I hope you're all doing well today. Today I thought that I would colour in my Korean colouring book, Deming's colouring book, for my Fairy Tales in February colour along. And I know it's a bit late in the month to be starting it, but I think you know me by now. And I always seem to do this, leave it really late in the month. And February being a short month, I'm feeling a little bit under pressure now to get my picture finished for my own colour along. So after looking at the book for what seemed like an age, I thought I would colour in with my Inktense pencils first, and then I would go over them with the Faber-Castell Classics in the red box. And the reason that I'm using the Inktense a lot lately is because my right arm seems to be a bit sore, even though it's my left arm that's damaged, but I guess it's getting more use because I can't use the left one as much. So that's why I thought I'd do it that way rather than all pencil that I usually like to use. Now, I am probably not going to get all that done on this video, and I'll probably do the pencil bit off screen because it's just easier for me at the moment to do that, just in little spurts, and when I get time I just do a little bit when I can. So today we took Buddy to the beach this morning, and luckily we got there early when the sun was out and it was a bit cool. And Buddy had a great time walking along the beach. If you follow him on Insta, he put a photo up there. But he seemed a little bit reluctant to get into the water. And then he met a few little dogs and this gorgeous blonde girl, an 8-month-old golden retriever. And she kept running in the water and swimming. So I guess Buddy thought she was super cute because he finally got in the water and had a little bit of a paddle. And he only sort of went up to his tummy, but he seemed to really like it. But he was a bit cautious. He was looking out at the ocean and going, oh no, I'll just stay at this length. So we still haven't got him in the pool yet. And by the same token, we haven't been in it much, but at least we got him in the ocean. And I figure that the pool is sort of working out to be like $2,000 a swim at this point in time. But anyway, it was good that he did get a little swim in at the beach this morning, because by the time we got home and we had breakfast, it started to rain, and there wasn't much in it in the beginning. It was a bit of a drizzle, bit of a shower, and then of course the storms came. So it's turned out to be a good day for colouring. And I've had a few messages and emails asking for an update about the whole Titicaca thing, which has been, at the time of this video, it's been over 6 weeks now. So thank you very much for thinking of me. I really appreciate it. So last week I had another ultrasound. I had one at the hospital, and then my doctor booked me in for an ultrasound and also for a mammogram, bearing in mind where the infection was. And both of them came back all clear. There's no nasties, but just a bit of residual contents in my breast and some scar tissue that's a little bit sore at the moment. And I have to say that I was freaking out about the mammogram, because I remember my mother-in-law telling me that it was really painful, and she said it was just excruciating, and I found the 5 needles in my breast and being cut in the surgery to be excruciating painful. So I thought this mammogram, bearing in mind that it's poor little Titicaca is still really tender, and the little girls on the mend, that I thought this would just be horrific, and I was getting really anxious about the whole thing. Well, shock horror, because it wasn't painful at all, and only a little tender when she was moving my poor little beat up girl into position. And I'd just been so scared of getting it done, and it was just a non-event. Like, I knew the ultrasound wouldn't be anything because I had one at the hospital, 6 weeks ago. So I do want to say, if you've been thinking about getting a mammogram and you've heard these horror stories that it's super painful, honestly, it's not painful at all. Now, obviously everyone is different, and everyone's bits and pieces are different, and what might be painful for me might not be painful for you, and vice versa. But honestly, it was nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. It was really nothing, except for, as I said, the one little girl that's been beat up in this whole Titicaca thing. And she was a little bit tender, but only because the lady was moving the equipment around on me and handling me, and that was a little bit painful. Just tiny bit painful, but that was only on my sore girl. But the one thing the lady that did my mammogram said was, she said the screening vans that you see in Australia where you go to get a mammogram, she said they might be a little bit more painful because the equipment that they use is not all fancy pants. I actually paid for my mammogram, and then I got, if you're in Australia, I got $200 odd back on Medicare sort of the next day. But if you're using those screening vans, apparently they are a little bit more painful. But honestly, if you're putting it off, just do it. It was nowhere near what I thought it was going to be. It was nothing. I was just like, is that it? I was expecting some other machine that was going to come next in the line. It was really nothing. And I'm so glad I got it done, like bearing in mind what I've been through for the last 6 weeks, because, better to be safe than sorry, and it was, something at the hospital that they wanted to do as well. So I'm glad I got it done. And I think it's been, 6 weeks, and I've had another course of antibiotics since the last video. So I've had something like 350 to 400 antibiotics, which is it's just crazy, the amount. And, right now, all I'm doing is just hoping that I don't get another infection, because there's just no way antibiotics are going to help me if I do, because I've had so many. Anyway, so the other thing that I did, my doctor feels that the problems that I've been having are related to undiagnosed diabetes. So obviously she wanted to do the usual way of approaching that to see if someone's got diabetes, which with me, I'm just getting over my anxiety of having a needle in my skin. So to do the next level one is sort of a little bit too much for me at the moment. But I did have a urine test, and unfortunately I failed pretty badly. It came back exceedingly high in sugar. So now she's getting quite insistent that I have the needle that terrifies me. And so rather than send me off to a pathologist, which is what they normally do, she's going to do it herself in the surgery. And I can bring my teddy bear apparently, and also David as well. And she's going to sort of anaesthetize my arm with numbing cream. And I have to go back next week to get a follow-up checkup on my little girl there. And so what I'm going to do is get her to put the blood pressure cuff on me, because one of my anxieties is just having my arm exposed. I know that might seem really weird to people, but just having my arm open where you can see the vein just freaks me out. It freaks me out to talk about it. And it's probably one of the reasons I always rip blood pressure cuffs off me, because I can't stand the feeling like they're gonna sort of puff up my arm to make the vein look more noticeable. I don't know if that makes sense. But so when I go to get my checkup next week, I'm going to get her to put the blood pressure cuff on me, because I had them do it at the hospital, and I was able to get through it. I did tense up, and of course it made my arm worse, and then the nurses got me to relax and it was better. So I'm trying to desensitize. I brushed off my psychology degree and, blew the dust off it, and, trying to desensitize. It's a method of trying to get used to something and get over an anxiety. So one of my anxieties is having my arm open like that. So I'm going to get her to do the blood pressure cuff thing on me, and I've been sort of practicing at home, opening my arm up and whatnot, and then I'll go to sort of the next level of watching needles and stuff, and hopefully in a couple of weeks' time I'll be able to have the test. But at the moment it still sort of freaks me out a lot. So hopefully I get there quick, because she's kind of insistent that I get it done pretty quickly. So anyway, that's where I'm at, and I'm working through that, and I actually should really make a note to go and watch these needle videos and whatnot. I will do that after we finish talking. So today's crime is a little bit different from others that I've done on this channel. But if you want to listen to something more true crime-ish, I've got my new true crime channel, and I'll put a link into my latest video up the top here. So today's story is about one of my favourite artists, which is Picasso. And when we studied him at school, it was one of the projects that I actually looked forward to, and I actually went to class for, because I was a bit of a rat bag at school. Now, I should say at my school, if you were naughty in art class, you were told to sit outside. Now, for a girl that was a bit naughty back then, you would hitch up your dress and tan your legs. And so nowadays, of course, we know about skin cancer, and it's a no-no, but back then it wasn't a punishment. And I had a great tan from being sent outside all the time during art class. I really wish I'd paid attention now, but I was a horrid child. I went to the Picasso classes for art class because I loved him, and I especially loved his Cubism period. But my favourite painting of all time is the Weeping Woman painting, and that's the one that I actually based my art project on at the time. And for memory, I traced a picture of it from a book, and I coloured it in with crayons for the project. And it was certainly no Picasso, though. It lacked the emotion that's in that particular painting, or that I feel when I look at that painting. I always think whenever I look at it, it's really depicts a woman whose heart is just breaking. Now, Picasso painted a series of Weeping Woman pictures, and it's estimated that during 1937 he actually created 36 images, like a lot of them were sketches, and 4 oil paintings, and it was like a little bit of an obsession with him there for a while. The most well-known picture in the Weeping Women series is my favourite, and that's the colourful one that's hanging in the Tate Gallery in London with the reds and whatnot in it. That's my very favourite of the series. And the woman that he used to model the Weeping Woman on was his mistress, Dora Maar, and he'd met her a couple of years earlier, and he was with her for 10 years. There's a lot to unpack in that relationship and Picasso in general, but we'll just leave it at that, as it's not relevant to today's story, but incredibly fascinating if you have time to dive in. I mean, I loved him as an artist, but, as a man, maybe not so much. The colourful picture of weeping a woman in the Tate actually has a bit of a criminal history. Picasso actually sold that painting to a man called Roland Penrose about a month after he painted it in 1937 for just £250, which was a lot back in 1937. And Roland Penrose said that he bought it when the paint was still wet, meaning it had just been finished painting. I don't think it was actually still wet, but pretty close to it. And he gave it to his son, Anthony, in 1963. I think Anthony was his son. I might be wrong on that. Might need to refresh my memory on that one. And then Anthony had it hanging in his home, and in 1969, the painting was actually stolen from their home, together with 20-odd other paintings by Picasso. And the reason that they had so many Picassos was because Roland was good mates with Picasso. He was also a painter and in the arts community. So these paintings were later recovered in a house that was being demolished. Labourers were working on the house, and along comes a Picasso in one of the rooms. Can you imagine? I mean, can you just imagine you're working away, knocking a building down, and there's a Picasso, and incredibly famous Picasso as well. So after that, the family decided that they would loan the painting to the Tate Gallery, where it would be safer and, they would have security. It doesn't seem that anyone was actually ever arrested for the theft of this painting, or if those labourers got a reward, but it does bring me to today's story, which is the theft of the Weeping Woman, but not that one. And I guess there must be something about the Weeping Woman series of paintings that makes people want to steal it. Because, to be honest, I love that painting so much. I'd love to have it in my home, but I'd draw the line at stealing it. But I think I can understand the temptation. There's just something about it. And Picasso, as I said, he painted a few oil paintings depicting the weeping woman that's grief-stricken, or sometimes with her child. And back in 1985 in Australia, the National Art Gallery of Victoria was lucky enough to snaggle one of the versions of Weeping Woman for $1.6 million. Now, this was a lot of money back in 1985 in Australia for a painting. Previously, we'd spent in Australia about $1 million for Blue Poles by Jackson Pollock, and that was just met with so much controversy. And Weeping Woman at 1.6 million was also met with a lot of controversy as well, even though it's a Picasso. Now, it's not as colourful as my favourite in the Tate, and most people describe it as acid green and vibrant mauve. And compared to some of the others in that series, they are a bit plain. So the one in the Tate and this one, they seem to be the most colourful of the ones that I've seen. For the gallery in Australia, it was a real coup having this version of Weeping Woman by Picasso. And the director at the time, he said, "This face is going to haunt Melbourne," which is the capital of Victoria in Australia, for my friends across the pond, for the next 100 years. And that's become somewhat true. The cost of acquiring the painting was a lot, but there's also ongoing costs like security and protecting it from harm, maintaining it, and of course insuring it. And it seems that the cost of insurance was a bit of a stretch for such an important painting. So it actually wasn't insured, because they said that that would exceed the annual budget for the art gallery. Can you imagine? So on Monday, the 4th of August 1986, staff noticed that the painting was no longer hanging in the gallery. Now, an alarm wasn't raised because there was a card indicating it had been removed for routine maintenance, and it was signed ACT. And this was assumed to mean Australian Capital Territory, where the National Gallery of Australia is housed, in the capital of Australia, Canberra. And this is common with works of art. They need to be specially cleaned by professionals, not given a flick with the duster, and they often get transferred between galleries. Although, on a side note, when I worked in an office, we used to have a few original Brett Whiteley paintings, and he's an Australian artist, quite well known in Australia at least, on the walls, and the cleaner used to always rest the vacuum cleaner handle against them, and I used to think, oh my god, I can't believe you're doing that against a Brett Whiteley. But anyway, I digress. So back to the National Gallery in Victoria. So the staff just assumed that it had been transferred to the National Gallery, and not that a crime had been committed. So of course they phoned to check with the gallery. After all, this was the most expensive painting Australia had ever purchased. And the gallery denied that the painting had been transferred to them, or that they'd actually requested it. The director of the gallery, Patrick McCoffey, he was in a state by then, hoping that it was just a prank, and He was walking around the gallery and searching everywhere for the painting. And I can't imagine how frightening it must have been to realise that the painting was gone. It wasn't insured, and this wasn't a prank. It wasn't the first time either a Picasso painting had caused him a bit of grief. Earlier on, one of Picasso's other paintings that the gallery had suffered the fate of a screwdriver piercing the canvas. And at least that painting was only valued at just under $500,000 and could be repaired. But Weeping Woman, valued at $1.6 million, was actually gone. And while all the staff were running around confused where the painting had gone, the Age newspaper in Melbourne received a letter which was basically a ransom demand for the painting. And it was signed by the Australian Cultural Terrorists, or ACT for short. And they claimed they'd actually stolen the painting. And they had a bit of fun with the letter. They addressed it to Rank Matthews rather than the art minister's correct name of Race Matthews. And they said in the letter, "We've stolen the Picasso from the National Gallery as a protest against the niggardly funding of the fine arts in this hick state and against the clumsy, unimaginative stupidity of the administration and distribution of that funding. 2 conditions must be publicly agreed upon if the painting is to be returned. The Minister must announce a commitment to increase the funding of the arts by 10% in real terms over the next 3 years, and must agree to appoint an independent committee to inquire into the mechanics of the funding of the arts, with a view to releasing money from its administration and making it available to artists. And the Minister must also announce a new annual prize for painting open to artists under 30 years of age. 5 prizes of $5,000 are to be awarded, which back then in 1986, $5,000 was quite a lot of money. And a fund is to be established to ensure that the real value of the prizes is maintained each year so that it goes up with the inflation. And the prize is to be called the Picasso Ransom." The letter goes on to mock the Minister of Arts, saying, "Because the Minister of the Arts is also Minister of Plod, we are allowing him a sporting 7 days in which to try to have us arrested while he deliberates. There will be no negotiation. At the end of 7 days, if our demands haven't been met, the painting will be destroyed and our campaign continue. Your very humble servants." Now, the reference to the Minister of Arts as the Minister of Plod refers to the fact that Race Matthews was also the police minister as well, so he had 2 positions in Parliament. Initially, the police weren't really sure what the deadline was because they didn't say when the 7 days started in their letter, so they didn't know if it was from date of publication or the date that the media received the letter or some other date, maybe the date that the letter was written. But anyway, they set to work immediately investigating the crime, and they felt that the painting must have been stolen sometime on the Saturday night or the Sunday morning. Looking at where the painting originally hung, they believe that they removed the canvas from the frame and using a fancy pants specialist screwdriver to undo the very special screws that were used to keep the painting in the frame. The frame itself was found about 25 metres away from the painting, so they only actually took the canvas. Now, I never knew this until I was looking at this case, and maybe you guys know it, but apparently Picasso was once a bit of a scallywag. He was once actually a suspect in the theft of the Mona Lisa from the Louvre on 26th of August 1911. I actually didn't know that the Mona Lisa had ever been stolen. So something similar happened. The painting was removed and staff assumed for photography, but really it had been stolen. And Picasso was actually questioned over the theft because of allegations made by a man that knew him, and he'd approached the police after a reward was placed in the papers. And all of France, just like Australia, was out looking for the thief, and it was finally located in 2013 in Florence, and it was taken by a house painter and a carpenter. He'd actually taken it to an art dealer, hoping to make a few bucks from it, and as soon as the art dealer confirmed its authenticity as the Mona Lisa, he turned him over to the police. But he'd actually worked at the Louvre and had helped to build the frame that the Mona Lisa was displayed in. So his insider knowledge really helped him out. But he laid low with the paintings stored in his wardrobe for a couple of years before he really started to try to sell it. Now, the Victorian police investigation of the theft of Weeping Woman, they felt that the thief may have had insider knowledge, or at least some art history knowledge, due to the sort of similarities in the cases. And also in both cases there was no sign of forced entry, which sort of added credence to the theory that this was an inside job. So the police searched all around the gallery and outside looking for the painting. They even drained the moat that surrounded the gallery, but still no clues. And by this time, the security staff at the gallery were taking a lot of heat that the most expensive painting in Australia had been stolen. And the gallery actually removed the chairs that the security guards would sit on, so they would patrol the areas on foot. And this led to some really unhappy staff, and they actually walked off the job and went on strike. And the government refused to give in to the ransom demand, and the Minister for Arts said he would not be budgeting by blackmail. And instead, the government doubled down and they offered a $50,000 reward for information leading to the capture of the thieves. And the minister said at the time, "I can't imagine that anybody who had genuinely at heart the interests either of art or of art lovers could have perpetrated an action of this sort." And the director of the art gallery said, "We live in a Philistine nation but a civilised city." So they were trying to guilt them into handing back the painting. And while the police were doing their investigation, more ransom notes were being received. A second ransom note received 4 days later said, "Good luck with your huffing and puffing, minister, you pompous fathead." And that was dated August 9th, which was a week after the theft. And you can see that they're enjoying sort of having a bit of fun taunting the arts minister. The note went on to say, "If our demands are not met, you will begin the long process of carrying about you the smell of kerosene and burning canvas." It also called the minister a tiresome old bag of swamp gas and a political he-man. Anyway, 2 days later, a third letter arrived at the minister's office saying, "Thank you for your support. Phase 2 begins shortly." And inside of the letter there was a burnt match, so the implication meaning, "We haven't heard from you, so we're going to burn the Picasso." So meanwhile, all the staff at the gallery are feeling under the spotlight. And everyone was wondering, is their colleague the one that snatched the Weeping Woman? Morale was really low, and especially with the talk of it being an inside job. And some people even wondered if there actually was an ACT group, and maybe this was just a cover-up for a group of serious art thieves and trying to take everyone's eye off the ball while they smuggled the painting out of the country or out of the state. But after the police received multiple ransom letters by the same group, they took it seriously that it was the ACT group behind the theft. And so by now there were 3 letters received, and it was clear no matter when this 7-day deadline started, it was definitely up by now. So the police went around still interviewing people in the art world, people that may be potential suspects that were seen in the area, but it all came to nothing. And about 3 weeks after the painting was stolen, the media received an anonymous tip, and the police received the same tip. It told them to go to Spencer Street railway station and, using the station master's master key, unlock locker number 227, and the painting would be inside. So they did just that, and they took along the director of the gallery, and inside the locker was a brown paper package that was the same size as would fit the painting. And they grabbed the package out, and there was a pile of journalists surrounding them, and they quickly put it into a police car with the director and went straight to the police forensic lab. And there they unwrapped the brown paper and string package, and they noted that it was packed professionally, probably by someone familiar with the transporting of art to ensure it wasn't damaged. And inside was the weeping woman. And the painting was authenticated by the director who was there, and it was also intact without any damage. So I can't imagine how relieved they all were to see this beautiful work of art back without any damage at all. There was one more letter though from the ACT group, and it's believed to have been included in the package, and it said, "Of course we never looked to have our demands met. Our intention was always to bring public attention to the plight of a group which lacks any of the legitimate means of blackmailing governments." Now, to this day, we don't really know who took the weeping woman, but there are some theories. And it's been nearly 36 years at the date of this recording, although the case is considered to be closed now. In 1989, the case was considered closed, and the police wouldn't reopen it unless something really new and compelling evidence came to light, and so far there hasn't been. But according to an ABC article that I read, it's believed that there were 3 or more people involved in the theft, and it seems likely that they were involved in the art world in some way. It might be peripheral or maybe an inside job, as they first suspected. Apparently, there were 2 women that were seen near locker 227, and they had a parcel. And the anonymous caller, he was said to have been a man, so 2 women there, 1 man. So Patrick McCuffey, though, the director of the gallery, recalled an incident that's pretty significant. Prior to the discovery of the weeping woman, a Melbourne art dealer had phoned him, and he'd sort of suggested that he go along and see a young artist he knew, because he thought he might have something that some information about the theft. So the director visited the artist at his studio in North Melbourne, and he noticed that he was taking a real interest in the theft. Around his studio, he had cut out all the newspaper clippings about the theft, and he had them all stuck up on his wall. And the director said to him a few times, the people who'd taken the painting, they could actually just put it in a luggage locker at Spencer Street railway station or at Tullamarine Airport. Now, the artist didn't say or do anything that would indicate that he knew or was going to or had knowledge of the theft. He just stood there stony-faced, apparently. But what the director was really offering him was an easy way out. Just put it at one of these lockers and we'll be happy just to get the painting back. No one wants to press charges. People just want the painting back. Anyway, about 48 hours later, they received an anonymous tip, that male caller that I just mentioned. And they said that the painting was in a locker at Spencer Street railway station, and that's just a hop, skip and a jump from North Melbourne, where the artist studio was. unlike the airport, which would have been a good half an hour or more drive back then from North Melbourne. Now, there's been a multitude of books and films and documentaries about the theft, including a theatre production. No one's sort of ever come forward and admitted taking the painting or being a part of the group that may have taken it. But it's certainly become well known, and it's certainly had its glory for at least 100 years. People are still talking about it, writing about it, doing films. It's also often used, especially in Victoria, in a humorous way. So, like when a sporting team loses or a politician has his party turn on him, they put up a picture of the weeping woman to showcase their distress. There's also a documentary about it called Framed on SBS, which I really want to watch. Apparently, Mark Fennell and a few others discuss who stole the Picasso, but really they're more interested in the deeper reasoning, like the lack of funding to the arts community at that time and the angst that so many artists felt that the expense of obtaining the Weeping Woman offset against what was being funded to the arts community, so that instead of having one big item, they could have helped so many other people. And Mark Fennell said the fact that he's the one that made the documentary, he said the fact that it was done means a lot of people have kept it a secret for so long. It sort of tells you something about the culture of the time, and I agree. I think it'd be really interesting to watch, and would be good to watch, especially knowing that Weeping Woman is safe and sound in the gallery. And after the theft, the gallery obviously stepped up their security. So that's it, the mystery of our Weeping Woman in Locker 227. I don't know that we'll ever know who took her, but I'm certainly glad that they returned her in one piece and intact, because I just love that painting. So I'd love to know your theories if you have any. And now I didn't get to finish the picture entirely, so I'll just put up what I've done so far. Now that's it from me. Until next time, stay safe and happy colouring.